Sharpening chisels and plane irons doesn't have to be difficult. This honing guide makes it easy peasy. Learning how to sharpen is one of the fundamental skills of woodworking. You need to know how to sharpen chisels and plane irons and just about any hand tool you're going to use. And if you're just starting out, the tricky part of sharpening is holding the tool at a consistent angle as you're rubbing it across the sharpening stone. So one way to make that a little bit easier is to use a honing guide. And there are all sorts of honing guides on the market, but one of my favorites is this Veritas Mk honing guide. It'll handle chisels and plane irons. This is the guide. It consists of a roller on the bottom and a clamp to hold the blade or chisel. But the real gem of this system is this registration jig. And that allows you to position the tool in the guide to get whatever bevel angle you want. And it sets it up automatically, so it takes out all the guesswork and just makes it a lot easier to get an accurate bevel angle. So let me show you how to set this up and sharpen a chisel or plane iron. I've got the guide disassembled so you can see the two components. I've got the roller assembly here and the clamp here. And the clamp attaches to the roller assembly using this brass thumb screw. And if you look at, you can see that there's numbered, color-coded numbers on here, 1, 2, and 3. And that allows you to have it in 3 different positions. Number 1 is for high bevel angles. Number 2 is for standard bevel angles. And number 3 is for back bevels. Most of the time, I just set this on number 2 for standard angles. So I'll go ahead and attach that now. So those color-coded numbers on the guide correspond to colors on this registration jig. I've got it set on the number 2, which is yellow, so I can use any of the yellow settings you see here on this jig. I'm going to hone a 25-degree bevel on this plane iron, so I'll go ahead and move that stop down to the 25 mark and tighten that nut down. And then to use the registration jig, you just slide it onto this front rail of the guide. You'll notice that there's a scale on the front rail of the clamp, and there's also an index mark on the registration jig. And this allows you to set the jig according to the width of your plane iron or your chisel. I'm going to be doing a 2-inch wide plane iron, so I'm going to move that index mark to the 2-inch registration there and tighten that down. Now I'll just flip this guide over. Got my plane iron here. I'll slide that through the jaws of the clamp. And you'll notice there's a fence along this edge. You want to make sure that the blade is tight against that fence and just slide it in until it contacts this stop right here. So hold that in place and flip the whole thing over and tighten down the 2 knobs on the clamp. And you want to make sure you tighten each knob just a little at a time so that you equalize the clamping pressure on the blade so that it doesn't pivot inside that clamp. And then you can remove this registration jig and you're ready to go. Once you've got everything set up, using the honing guide is actually really simple. I'm going to start off on the coarse stone. This is an oil stone, but you could use a water stone or sandpaper on a piece of plate glass. Any kind of sharpening medium will work with this honing guide. So I'm just going to put a little oil here. And you'll notice that there are a couple of indentations here on the honing guide. A nice place to rest your fingers. I like to hold my index fingers down on the blade. And then all you want to do is move it back and forth, roll it across the stone. And make sure that you keep steady pressure on the blade. You don't want to lift it as you're pulling back or moving forward. Just keep that blade in contact with the stone at all times. So I'm just going to work this over this coarse stone to establish my primary bevel. This will take me a few minutes, but I'm just going to keep going here. Okay, we're starting to get it grind right across the front edge of that bevel. So I'll just keep working it until I get it nice even grind all across the front there. All right, let's take a look and see where we're at here. All right, that's looking good. You can see it's a nice straight bevel all the way across there, pretty even all the way back. This is a laminated plane iron, so you can see a line right down the center there. This is hard steel in the front and then softer steel in the back. That's why it's got a little bit different shade, but the bevel looks good. So I'll do the same thing now on the fine grit stone, but before I switch over, one important thing to do is wipe off this roller really well so that you don't transfer any grit from your coarse stone to your fine stone. So you want to make sure you get that nice and clean. So here it's just the same thing. I'll put a little oil on here and just hone this edge. Doesn't take nearly as long on this final finishing stone. Let's take a look here and see. So the last thing I'll do is move the stone over to the edge of my bench, and there's usually a wire burr, a wire edge on the back of the blade. So you want to remove that just by turning the blade, laying it flat on your stone, and just taking a couple swipes back and forth to remove that wire edge. Looks good. One more feature that this honing guide has that's really handy is this knob here that allows you to put a micro bevel on the edge of the iron. And you can see there's a little witness mark at the top there at 12 o'clock. So all you have to do is pull that knob out and turn that so it's down at 6 o'clock. And then just take a few more passes at that setting and it'll create a nice micro bevel along the edge of that blade. And that just helps strengthen the edge so it doesn't break down as fast as you're planing. So for the micro bevel, all you really need is about 10 to 20 strokes there. And I don't know if you can see that, but there's just a very narrow bevel right at the front of that cutting edge, very narrow micro bevel. And like I said, that just helps strengthen the edge so that it doesn't break down as quickly. This Veritas honing guide will handle plane irons up to 2 7/8 inches wide. It'll also work fine with chisels, but Veritas does recommend not using it with chisels narrower than 1/2 inch, only because the narrow chisels are kind of unsteady as you're honing, and so there's a tendency for it to rock back and forth. But it works fine on wider chisels. So there you have it. That's the Veritas Mk honing guide. To get yours, just click on the link in the description below. And to receive weekly videos like this one, sign up for our free eNotes video tips by going to thewoodsmithstore.com. When you do, you'll receive $25 in online gift certificates as a bonus. And just so you don't miss anything, be sure to subscribe to our Woodsmith Store YouTube channel.